So centuries ago, explorers needed to lobby kings and people of influence in order to get their expedition sponsored. Now back then Google or GPS or satellite didn't exist, so there was no way of knowing how big or how small the colony gonna be, what sort of natural resource it might have, or how far or how close is it from our current location. In order to convince king or people of influence, you need to be a very good storyteller or politician, and obviously master the art of lobbying. Unlike Christopher Columbus and other famous explorers, I'm gonna give you all the tools and all the information you need in order to lobby your case about if you should invest in China or you should invest in the United States of America.
If you were today Christopher Columbus, what country will you lobby for? China and the US now account for over 1/3 of the global economic output and over 50% of the global growth. Bilateral trade volume has increased by over 250 times since the early days of diplomatic ties, and it takes up to 1/5 of the global total. We're going to dive in deeper in order to understand what country is worthy enough for us to invest in 2020. So I have selected the following 9 criteria that will help us understand what country is worthy enough for us to invest in. So let's start. Regimes. China regime. China has a population of over 1.4 billion and has an authoritarian political system that is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, for those who don't know, it means it's a government that's characterized by strong central power and limited political freedom. Now, unlike other political regimes, their election happen every 5 years and with no term limit. USA regime. USA has a population of over 330 million people. It has a federal constitutional republic with a re-election every 4 years and a term of 2, meaning a president cannot be a president for no more than 8 years. Now, the power is divided into 3. So you have the president of the United States, which is the head of the state and the head of the government, and then you have the Congress and judiciary, which share the power, is limited to the national government, and then you have the federal government, which share sovereignty with the state government.
So let's look. We were looking at Chinese regime and the US regime. Now, if I have to choose, I'll feel more comfortable choosing Chinese regime because they have an unlimited term compared to the US, where there is maximum capacity or maximum turn time is 2, so meaning no more than 8 years. So for that specific reason only, I decided to vote with China. So China 1, US 0.
Economic growth. We're gonna measure it by looking at the GDP. GDP stands for gross domestic product, which is the total monetary or market value of all the finished goods and services produced within a country borders. Now, if you want to understand in a simple term, let's say you have a bakery and we need to understand how much money your bakery is making. So we're going to look at the total goods. In this case, it might be like croissant or bread in your bakery, and based on that, we understand what is your GDP. So the higher your GDP is, the more growth your store, or in this case the country, is. Now, when looking at China for the past 10 years, so we're looking at from 1999 to 2019, we can see that overall the economic growth was always above 5.9%. If we do an average, it's for the past 10 years there's an average of 8.6. US economic growth. So US economic growth, if you look at 2009, it has a negative of GDP of minus 2%. For those who remember, 2008 there was the financial crisis. If you need a reminder, I highly recommend to watch the movie The Big Short. Now, if you look at over the past 10 years, the average of the GDP in the US was just slightly over 2%.
So we're looking now at the economic growth. Now, comparing China and the US, China has something that is very unique. China has been able to maintain a very healthy growth compared to the US, where, like many other countries, they were heavily affected by the financial crisis that happened in 2008, and we even see a very negative growth. So for this specific reason only, I feel more comfortable to ride and to invest in China compared to the US. So that's a vote for me, once more, for China.
Industrial production measures the output of industrial sector, which typically comprise of mining, manufacturing, utilities, and in some cases construction. China industrial production for the past decade has been sustained by over 5%. Even though there has been a clear downtrend in regards to industrial production, which started at 2010 and has stabilized around 2019. US industrial production. Once again, we consider the financial crisis that are happening in the US and globally has dramatically affected the US, with the industrial production going down as low as minus 50%. Now, if overall the industrial production has an average of below 5%.
So now we're going to cover industrial production. So let's summarize it. So we all know that most of our item in our house is made in China. So the number that we see about China leading the industrial production is pretty much straightforward. Now the side that was actually quite shocking is that US had a negative production. So for this specific reason, once more, I feel more comfortable on this specific criteria to vote China as the winner for this category. So let's see the other category.
Investment. An investment is an asset or an item acquired with a goal of generating income or appreciation. In an economic sense, an investment is a purchase of goods that are not consumed today but are used in the future to create wealth. China capital investment in terms of dollars has tripled for the year between 2008 to 2018. US capital investment. Yet again, we consider the impact of the financial crisis that happened in the US and all around has impacted dramatically the US capital investment for the following year. And it took it a very long time to regain and to slowly grow.
Investment. Why do we care about investment? The more government or country is investing, it's a very good sign. Now, when you look at the US hasn't been consistent, and compared to China, which has been consistent, has been also increasing the amount of money and they're actually investing. Now, think about as if now you're investing in Facebook and you know that Facebook for the past 5 years or 10 years has been purchasing and acquiring other company, it makes you feel more comfortable. For example, Facebook has acquired WhatsApp. So this is obviously a very good thing from my perspective, is if I'm going to invest in a country, I want to invest in a country that see that sometime you need to invest elsewhere, not just within, to be able to make much more money. For this specific perspective, once again, China is my winner.
Labor market. The labor market, also known as the job market, refers to the supply of and demand for labor, in which employees provide the supply and employers provide the demand. It is a major component of the economy. Now, when looking at China employment rate for the past 10 years, China has an average of over 4.52%. And when looking at US unemployment rate for the past 10 years has been over 6.5%.
Labor market. Now, the numbers do not lie. Once again, China, shocking, has a very good number on paper when it comes to the unemployment rate. So for this specific reason, the numbers are not lying. China is the winner when it comes to unemployment rate. Now, you obviously want to invest in a country that everyone is working. You don't want to invest in a country where like 80% or 90% of the population are unemployed. So this is obviously a very important criteria that we obviously want to look at. So that's another vote for China.
Portfolio investment inflow equities. Portfolio investment are investment in the form of a group of asset, including transaction in equity securities such as a common stock and debt security such as banknote and bonds. China equity inflow. China equity inflow has been consistent, but the average for the past 10 years between 2008 and 2018 was $29,446 billion. US portfolio investment inflow in equities. So when we do an average of the last 10 years, so basically from 2008 to 2018, we have 74,619 billion, which is the average of the last 10 years for the period between 2008 to 2018.
So now we're looking at equity inflow. Now, US has a very substantial inflow of equity. Now, compared to China, China has been always growing for the past few years, but still very far away from the US. Now, even though the US has a very negative inflow of equity, it still be not significant because overall the whole market, the whole inflow of money coming to equity is very substantial. For that specific reason, I decided to vote for a specific category, the US. So let's check what's next.
Trade balance. So the balance of trade is basically the difference between the value of a country import and export. If it's a positive trade balance, it means that it is exporting more than an import, and if it's a negative, it means that it import more than it export. China trade balance. When looking at China trade balance between 2008 and 2019, the average trade balance of China was $236 billion, which is a positive trade balance. US trade balance. Now, we all heard about it. We all heard about Trump talking about it. Let's see how bad it is. So when you look at the period of 2008 to 2018, USA trade balance is in the red. Now, to give the exact number, is the average of the trade balance is $527 billion in negative. So the US import more than it export.
Trade balance is the whole argument that Trump is actually doing with China. Trump's argument is that US is importing more than is exporting, and the Chinese has been doing funny business in a simple term. Now, look at this number, I see why Trump is very concerned about the trade balance. US has a very negative trade balance. So basically they are importing more than they are exporting. Now, for that specific reason, I feel more comfortable because on paper China trade balance isn't positive. For that specific sector, I'll give a positive vote for China.
Government debt. Government debt, also known as national debt, the government adds to the debt whenever it spends more than it receives in tax revenue. Each year's budget deficit gets added to the debt. Each budget surplus gets subtracted. China government debt. The average debt of between 2009 and 2019 stood at 40.76, which is the average of the China government GDP. USA government debt. USA average debt between 2008 and 2019 was 104% from the GDP. This is literally more than the gross domestic product of the country.
Government debt. So we obviously can see that the USA has a very substantial debt when it comes to the GDP. It has now, for the past period, has surpassed their GDP. When we look at China and global debt is basically now over 50%. Now, based on this criteria only, I can literally say that it's not a brainer. China win on a category of global debt. They're actually able to maintain it in a much smaller scale compared to the US. So that's my sentence for global debt.
Forecast. We use the International Monetary Fund, also known as IMF, which is an international organization that promotes global economic growth and financial stability to encourage international trade and reduce poverty. We use their own forecast for the economy of China and also the economy of the US. So let's dive in. China economic growth forecast. Now, when we look at the forecast for the past 10 years, China economic growth forecast well above 6%. Now, with the exception of 2020, which was the COVID-19 or Corona period, where you can see that the forecast has been adjusted to be just above 1% for China, and for next year to be way above 8%. US economic growth forecast. Just like China, also US has been affected, but in a much larger scale. US has a -75% impact of regression on their GDP, and the forecast for the following year is slightly shy from 5%. Overall, for the past 10 years, the growth forecast for the IMF was just below 3%.
So with a lot of help from the IMF, we got a very clear idea where US and where China is going. So US forecast for the next few years seem to be okay, but the forecast for China is very promising. So in this category, China is the winner.
Stock market capitalization. Market capitalization refers to the total dollar market value of a company's outstanding share of stock, commonly referred to as market cap. It is calculated by multiplying the total number of company outstanding share by the current market price of one share. So let's dive in. China market stock. China stock market has dramatically increased between 2008 and 2018. China has tripled its market capitalization when it comes to the stock. Still very far away from the US stock capitalization. US stock market capitalization. Also, just like China, the US stock market capitalization has also tripled for the past 10 years. But yet again, the US market has a much further advantage, as the US stock market capitalization is way bigger compared to the China stock market capitalization.
So stock market, this is something we all heard about. We heard about Microsoft, we heard about Netflix, Amazon, and many other American stock. Now, it's not shocking that the US capitalization is very, very large compared to the Chinese stock market. Now, even though right now we have a lot of Chinese companies that are actually start to pick up and become very big and very popular, obviously the US market has a substantial amount of money coming. For this specific category, the US is the winner.
China international tourist revenue. China revenue for the past 10 years has been within ups and downs. It hasn't been able to maintain a very strong foothold when it comes to tourist revenue. Compared to the US international tourist revenue, which has dramatically grew from 2008 to 2018.
So tourism. With the help of Hollywood and actress and musician and basically being exposed since our childhood to all this American style, if it's basketball, football, art, culture, fashion, and many more, even food, it's very obvious as to why the US has a substantial amount of revenue when it comes to tourism. Now, whenever we look at China, we still see a nice growth, but nothing compared to the US. So when it comes to tourism, obviously US here in this category is the winner. So now let's roll it and let's see who is the winner. And the winner is China. So China has won seven category compared to US, which has won 3. Now again, this is just for you to understand. I have selected very few category. There's plenty of other categories that maybe US would have won and China would have lost. So please bear in mind, this is just my own personal opinion, and someone else could have done and would have found another winner. Again, this is just an idea. I'm giving you the option to see how fun it may be to look at things. If you're a Christopher Columbus or an explorer, how or what country you feel more comfortable to lobby with all information that you know right now. Hope this video was helpful. This is me, Zari, Fun and Square. Subscribe to my channel. Until next time, ciao.